Hey guys, Triple B here. Today we're going to be going over the upcoming set Stellar Crown and the cards that I think you should be picking up from it. So effectively a buy list. The set's definitely come out a little quicker than normal. We only got Shroud of Fable a few weeks ago and have only seen the pre-release promos earlier this week, so a bit of a surprise. If you do want to get your hands on a booster box or ETB for the set to crack open some packs though, I'm doing a giveaway over on Twitter, so link in the description for that. Entries will close September 9th though, so you got to get in quick. Enough of that though, let's just get into the cards. So the first one we're going to be talking about is the staple cards. We've got Noctowl coming out of the set that allows you to search your deck for any 2 cards as long as you have a Terra Pokemon in play, and it's when you evolve up into it. So it's not like you can do this every single turn of the game. It's a, hey, you evolved into this, cool, get yourself some stuff. It's a great consistency card, kind of bringing back to when we had the Inteleon line that had shady dealing. So you could just look through your deck, get a trainer card. You evolve up into the Drizzle, it got you 1. Into the Inteleon, got you 2. For Noctowl, it's just a one-off thing. It's only got a stage 1. Get into 2 cards, and there is the secondary condition of needing a Terra though. Seems like a solid addition to a number of decks. I think Dragapult will be using this, Charizard could use this, Terrapago EX is coming out in this, it can be using it. Any Terra Pokemon I feel like is just going to be like, do I have space for this? No? I'll make space for this. I need this in the deck. The next card I'm going to recommend everyone picks up is Area Zero Underdepths. If a player has a Terra Pokemon in play, they can have up to 8 Pokemon on their bench, which I know a lot of people kind of saw this and are like, oh, it's just for Terrapagos. This seems like a great card for a number of decks though, like Charizard EX and Dragapult, who we just talked about. They're both Terra Pokemon, so they fulfill the condition of being able to use this and have 8 things in play. They struggle with bench space, so it just gives them access to expand that. Like Charizard, you're going to have a Rotom in play. You might want to put Luminion in play. They take up a lot of bench space, and you don't necessarily want them there the whole game. So you play this, it lets you expand your bench a little bit, so you can have extra Charmanders, you can have extra Pidgeys, you can have anything else on there. And then at any point you just go, okay, Lost Vacuum, or bump this with a different stadium. It shrinks your bench back down to 5. You get rid of those Rotoms, you get rid of those Luminions. They're not easy 2 prize targets for your opponent to gust up anymore. They're just gone, but you've been able to use those cards. So this stadium definitely seems like a great staple a number of decks can be using. Also, the new supporter card Crispin. It allows you to search your deck for up to 2 basic energy cards of different types, reveal them to your opponent, because they need to confirm they're different types, put 1 of them into your hand and 1 onto your Pokemon. So it's a great way to accelerate some energy out. That's not counting as your attachment for turn. So you get yourself a Fire and a Psychic as an example, attach it to a Pokemon, well, attach 1 of them to a Pokemon, and then just use your attachment for turn on the other one, attaching it to it. Main one I'm talking about obviously being Dragapult, who needs both those energies and struggles with energy acceleration. It's been using like Neo Upper Energy, which technically works, but you want to use your A-Spec for something different. Crispin allows you to do that. We're also getting a supporter card Lacey. It lets you shuffle your hand into your deck, then draw 4 cards. If your opponent has 3 or fewer prizes remaining though, you draw until you have 8. So this is a great late game supporter. It allows you to get into 8 cards. You don't have to discard anything, right? Like Professor's Research, drawing 7, really good. This draws 8, which is better, and you don't have to discard anything. Obviously, it's situational, so you're not going to be able to use it half of the game. Like until they've taken 3 prize cards, it's not going to be online, so it's not perfect, but it definitely seems like a great addition for a number of decks, like single prize decks where you know your opponent's going to have to take 3 more turns before the game ends. Being able to use this turn after turn and not have to discard resources, yeah, like I'm definitely game for that. To show you guys a full list of this, though, obviously going one by one makes it a little bit tricky. So there's the stable cards I'd recommend. Also did forget to cover Briar. You can only play this card if your opponent has exactly 2 prize cards remaining, and until the end of this turn, if your opponent's active Pokemon gets knocked out by damage from one of your Terra Pokemon, you get to take 3, or not 3 prizes, but 1 more prize. So if you're knocking out a 2 prizer, you can be taking 3 prizes if your opponent gets ahead in the prize trade, or if your opponent's promoted like a single prize Pokemon into the active spot and gone, well, you need 2 prizes to close out the game, gust around this. This is just a different option. It's like, well, I don't need to gust around that. I can just use Briar and take it out. Or if you don't have enough damage, like maybe you're only able to do 100 damage for some reason, you could use like Prime Catcher, gust up a 70 HP thing into the active, use Briar, knock that out, take 2 prizes off it. Definitely seems like a very versatile card, and am keen to see it, in the standard format. Covering the next cards, these are going to be the new decks coming out of this set. So Terrapagos EX, obviously being the headliner card of the set. It's on the pack art. It's kind of the one that they're hyping the set about. It's the one from the Scarlet Violet DLCs that the entire Stellar mechanic is based around. it's seeming like it's going to be a solid deck. It's a colorless Pokemon with 230 HP, and it's a basic. The attack on it is going to cost 2 colorless energy to use. There's a condition on it. You can't use it on the first turn of the game if you're going second. So it's not like you can just come out of the gate and start swinging like other decks are able to, like Raging Bolt or Roaring Moon. So it doesn't quite have that same burst potential, meaning you're going to need at least a turn to go into the game. Probably want to go first with this deck, to be honest. So it's just like, hey, I can start establishing my bench, and then on the next turn I can start attacking. If you're going second, it's kind of weird because you're not able to attack. You pass it back to your opponent. They're able to start getting their things online. They're stage 2s, and then they can attack into you, and you don't really want to give them that option. So I feel like this is more so a go first deck. The attack on there, though, it does a multiplier of 30 for each of your bench Pokemon in play. So Area 0, which we talked about already, lets you get up to 8 bench guys. 8 times 3, 240. It's a nice number to hit. You're going to be taking out other Terrapagos EX. You're going to be taking out Raging Bolts. You're going to be half hitting into stage 2s. Probably pair this with some other attacking options, though. Like, I know a lot of people have talked about Palkia making a comeback, and yeah, I could definitely see that. Palkia V-Star scales up damage based on the amount of things on your bench. Terrapagos scales up things based on the amount of things on your... Well, Terrapagos is on your bench. Palkia is off yours and your opponent's. So Area 0, you fill your bench. Your opponent has a big bench. Palkia goes big. Yeah, keen for this card. The second attack on here, also pretty interesting. 180 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, prevent all damage done to this Pokemon from basic non-colorless Pokemon. So if your opponent's trying to like splash in some basic fighting Pokemon as a counter for this, you use this attack and they need to gust around you, or they're not going to be able to do any damage into you. So definitely a useful attack to have on it. Some cards to combine with this if you do go all in on Terrapagos. We've got Glass Trumpet. You can only use this if you have a Terra Pokemon in play, which Terrapagos is. You choose 2 of your bench colorless Pokemon, which Terrapagos is, and attach a basic energy from your discard pile to each of them. So 2 Terrapagos, you're basically getting charged up, an attachment for turn, and it's online, or just 2 Glass Trumpets to 2 of them, and they're both online. You still have attachment for turn. It's a little crazy. It means you can be using that second attack very quickly. We're also getting Bouffalant, who has Curly Wall. If you have another Bouffalant in play, all your basic colorless Pokemon take 60 less damage from attacks. You can't apply more than 1 of this ability, though, so you get 2 Bouffalant on your bench, and Terrapagos' HP effectively goes up by 60. You check a Bravery Charm on there, it goes up by another 50. And this is recurring, right? This is 60 less damage, so it's not they have 60 more health, it's they're taking less hits, or less from the hit. So it's kind of rolling over. If they're trying to 2-hit into you, maybe now they have to 3-hit into you. 1-shot turns into a 2-shot. I think you see where I'm going with this. The attack on here, 130 damage. It's not bad, but the fact that we have Glass Trumpet, you can charge this up. So if you need to get past like a EX wall, like a Mimikyu, Bouffalant's able to attack, or if you want to go with a single prize attacker, just to make your opponent have to take an extra prize, right? Like they're wanting to go 2-2-2 to close out the game as quickly as possible. You're making them have to play a 7-prize game. It's definitely an interesting card to include. Fan Rotom, it's got the Fan Call ability. On your first turn of the game, you can use this card. Well, use the ability. You search your deck for 3 colorless Pokemon with 100 HP or less, reveal them, put them into your hand. Yeah, not bad. Bouffalant has exactly 100 HP, so it's like you put Fan Rotom down, you grab your 2 Bouffalant and maybe something else. Like maybe you're running it with Pidgeot, you get your Pidgey, like you start establishing your bench, or a Bidoof. So yeah, very interesting ability. The attack on here, 70 damage. If there's a stadium in play, this attack fails. Oh no, if there isn't a stadium in play, it fails. 70 damage for 1 colorless energy. Like you can just start attacking immediately as long as you can get Area 0 in play. Like you're going to be playing this in Terrapagos is the call. You're probably going to have 4 Area 0s. You should be able to do this pretty consistently. And then you can take out pre-evolution things, right? Like Terrapagos can't attack the first turn of the game, but Rotom can, and it can take out a Charmander or a Pidgey or a Frigibax, or even just do a little bit of chip damage into something that is like, Terrapagos is going to struggle to one-shot that. I'll just do a 70 ahead of time for it. Area 0, we've already talked about, but it is deck specific to Terrapagos, so figured we'd cover it. Another new deck coming out of this set is Hydrapple EX, who has the Ripe Charge ability. Once during your turn, you can attach a basic grass energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon, and if you do, you heal 30 damage from that Pokemon. So if your opponent's trying to do a little bit of chip damage into you, like maybe you're playing into Dragapult, they're putting 6 damage counters onto your bench, it's like, well, I'm just going to attach a grass energy and heal some of that off. Yeah, not a bad shout. The attack on here is also going to combine amazingly with the ability. Syrup Storm does a base damage of 30 and then 30 more damage for each grass energy attached to your Pokemon. So not specifically itself. We have Ogre Pond that does extra damage based off the amount of energy on itself and your opponent's active. Hydrapple just goes, my entire bench makes me stronger. So you're going to combine this with Ogerpon EX is kind of the way I'm seeing the deck. You get multiple Hydrapples in play. They're able to accelerate multiple grass energy. Ogerpon accelerates multiple grass energy. Area 0 can be played with this, so you could have theoretically 4 Ogerpon, 4 of these, and an attachment for turn. You can get 9 energy out in 1 turn. With the base damage, that's what, 300 damage coming out in 1 go? It's a stage 2, so you're not getting it online immediately. You have an attachment for turn the turn before and have procced those Ogerpons before. So yeah, you can hit some scary numbers. I'm not saying you're ever going to get to that point where you have 4 Hydrapple or that you're necessarily going to build a deck with 4 Hydrapple, but yeah, the burst potential of this card, it's definitely very intimidating. The other new deck coming out this set, kind of. This is me just getting a little bit ahead of myself, but we're getting a new Duraludon in this set, and it has the attack Raging Hammer. It does a base damage of 80 and 10 more damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon. It has 130 HP, so that's not a lot. But we already know that we're getting an Arch Alodon EX in the set coming out after this. It's Surging Shocks. So I see this Duraludon being the one that you're going to want to play with that Arch Alodon. You have access to Raging Hammer as long as you have a Relicanth on your bench, right? So you can go Nest Ball, get a Relicanth on your bench. Arch Alodon is capped at 220 damage on its attack normally, but it has a lot of health. You can reduce the amount of damage it's going to take as long as you have a Full Metal Lab on it or Rigid Band, so it can tank some hits, and then you get access to a larger attack off Raging Hammer. So that's kind of why I'm eyeing up this Duraludon. Not 100% sold on that. That's how I'm going to build the deck, but having access to that, it definitely seems like a great option to include. There is an Arch Alodon in this set too that I'm thinking like 1 copy of just to kind of have for that deck could be a great call, or even just slot into some other stuff. But its Steel Bridge ability makes it so the retreat cost of any of your Pokemon with a Steel energy attached to them, it just doesn't exist. They have no retreat cost. If your opponent's trying to boost up the retreat cost of them, it's just like, nah, it just says nothing. I look in the bottom right corner of this card and it's nothing there. It also makes for a solid single prize attacking option, so if they do run something like Mimikyu, you could attack them with this, but you'd likely just attack them with Duraludon before you evolve it up in that situation. Could come up though, doing 160 damage isn't anything to be glossed over. And I think that's about it for those ones. Yeah, so for the new decks, these are the cards. If you're kind of wanting counts, that's what I'd recommend picking up of those. The next cards we're going to talk about though are the kind of rogue decks that could be coming out of the set. Like, they seem like they have potential. They could be good. I'm not necessarily saying like I'm gonna highly recommend picking these up, but if they're on your radar and if you think they're interesting, they seem like they have potential is kind of what I'm saying. Orthworm EX has the ability Kerpow Return. When this Pokemon gets damaged from an attack of your opponent's Pokemon, you put 2 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon for each Steel energy attached to this. So you compare this with something like Matang that just rushes out Steel energy from your deck, charge up the attack cost for this, and also make it so if your opponent hits you, they're gonna get hurt. I like that. It's kind of cheeky and feels like they're going more so back to the roots of like Steel type Pokemon should be tanky. And I like that. Like, you want this to be tanking hits, and as it's tanking hits, it's returning damage to your opponent's Pokemon. It's a basic, so you can use Bravery Charm, or you could chuck on like Hero's Cape on it to get it up to 320 HP. Not too bad. You can be running this with Full Metal Lab as well, so it takes less damage from attacks. And since it's a basic, you can just go Penny and pick it up. So like, it eats a hit or two, your opponent's taking damage from them, and then you just go, cool, and you're not even going to KO me because I'm just scooping this up. And then you had to have another one ready to go, and yeah, you're fine. The attack on here though is kind of the thing that's making me think it's not going to be meta necessarily. I feel like it'll be a fun like tier 2 deck. Rock Tomb, you're only going to do 150 damage. During your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon can't retreat, so you could lock something in the active and make it so they have to have a switch card to get around it, right? Like, they can't hard retreat out. They have to use physically a switch or evolve to get through this effect. So you're kind of forcing them that it's like, you have to hit me. Like, I've done a bit of damage into you and you have to hit me with this thing, or you can just say pass and I'm going to hit you again. So interesting concept there for sure. And honestly, I just like Earthworm. I think it's a really cool Pokemon. We're also getting a Choodle that evolves into Dreadnought. So Dreadnought's Impregnable Shell ability makes it so that if your opponent's Pokemon would deal 200 damage or more to this Pokemon, they do 0 damage. There's a lot of things that can only do big numbers, right? Like Charizard, after they've taken a single prize, they're going to be doing 210. you're invincible into Charizard. They have to try and attack you with single prize Pokemon from then out, right? Like they'd have to go in with like a Charmander and try and poke at you. Even if they're running it with Radiant Charizard as like a single prize attacking option, it still does over 200. They could try and attack you with Pidgeot EX, who does 120. Then they're trying to two-shot into you though, which means they're two-shotting into a single prize Pokemon, and then with Hard Crunch, you're going to be two-shotting into a two-prize Pokemon. That sounds a lot better for us than it does for them. So Hard Crunch does a base damage of 80, and if your opponent's active Pokemon already has any damage counters on it, 80 more. So you're doing 80 followed up by 160. That's actually, that's not as good of a math as I thought. That's only getting up to 240, but you're doing chip damage into stuff. That Pidgeot I talked about, they actually would win that race into you. So you'd want to pair this with something that can get some damage counters out for you to kind of help out. But be very cautious of how you play your matches, because if you bench anything that isn't a Dreadnought, your opponent's just going to gust around it, right? They just go, oh, you've benched another Choodle. I'm just going to gust kill that. I'll get a prize off that, and I'll find a way to deal with this Dreadnought somehow. And that would be concerning. But yeah, definitely keen on this card. There's a lot of decks that, yeah, like I said, they have to do a large number. If you pair Miraidon, for example, they're lightning type. They do double damage into you. They're hitting like 400. So unless you have like a very small bench, if you have nothing benched and they go with Raikou even, right? They could have 3 things on their bench, I think. So then they're doing 60 plus the base of 20, 80, doubles to 160 for a KO. Yeah, like you just bench some stuff and you're invincible into them. I like that. Even Iron Thorns, its hit weakness for you, it gets up to 280. Yeah, Dreadnought's kind of interesting, but I feel like it's kind of like a tier 2 rogue deck. We're getting a new Marowak as well, kind of the same concept here. There is a Cubone we currently have in format that boosts the attack damage of your Marowak by 30 for each of them in play. And this Marowak's attack Bone Revenge does 60 damage and 120 more damage if any of your Cubone have damage counters on them. So you want 3 Cubone in play, boost you by 90. You can be pairing it with Grant to boost up your fighting type attacks by another 30, getting up to an extra 120. And then the attack on here doing 180. You can get up to 300. Chuck a tool card on there to boost it a little further, like a Defiance Band or Maximum Belt. Yeah, there's one-shot potential into stage 2 EXs with this. Is a lot to set up. It's not nothing, but there's definitely potential for it, and I'm keen to see what people cook up. Also, just for like single prize formats, I like the idea of this card. We're also getting a Medicham EX whose Chew Atsu attack puts damage counters on your opponent's active Pokemon until their HP remaining is 50. The idea with this one would be pairing it with something that can poison your opponent's Pokemon, like Brute Bonnet. They poison them, between turns they take 10. You have Radiant Sneasler on your bench, between turns they take 2 more damage from that poison, and then with Perlius Jungle they're taking 2 more. So you're putting them down to 50 health remaining, then poisoning them to take 50 damage between turns, and they just get knocked out. It's a similar concept to the Alolan Raticate deck that we've seen floating around very sparingly. And you don't really see that making day 2 at regionals. It's kind of why I'm putting this in there, as it's got potential. I think it's a little easier to pull off since you could use DTE on this. You're not reliant on like reversal energies. So keen to see what people cook up with this card, because yeah, I definitely see potential there. The last one we're going to talk about, and Jake Gearhart, your site's not working. There's one more card. It's not showing up though. We're just going to go into, whoops, not those. These ones. These are the ones that could be good. If you want to pick them up, absolutely. I think they have potential in the format. I don't see them as being top tier things, so I'm not going to recommend everybody pick them up. But if you're keen for these cards, there's definitely potential there. Next, we're going to talk about the deck upgrades. So the deck upgrades are obviously for decks that already exist and could be upgrades. Raging Bolt EX can easily slot in the single prize Raging Bolt since it's going to use the same energy types, a lightning and a fighting, and it gives you a sniping attack. So this attack does 30 damage to one of your opponent's Pokemon for each energy attached to this. So you go Sada to this, attach for turn, you can snipe 60 first turn of the game potentially if they're trying to hide like a Charmander or Frigibax with low HP on their bench, or take out a Pidgey just so they're not getting into Pidgeot on the following turn for added consistency. I don't see this being something included as high counts, but as a one-off card in that deck, definitely seems like there's some potential for it. We're getting a Joltik as well that I think could be good for Raging Bolt EX, as its attack Battery Charge searches your deck for 2 basic grass and 2 basic lightning energy, and you get to attach them to your Pokemon in any way that you'd like. You're running lightning, you're running grass, you're getting 4 energy out with his attack. It's not bad. Obviously, you want to be able to go like Sawda, attach for turn, start taking knockouts as quickly as possible with Raging Bolt, but also including this as a one-off option in the deck. It's a single prize Pokemon, so if your opponent knocks it out, they're still having to go 2/2/2 after it, right? And play a 7 prize game. So it's fine to kind of have this sat in the active if your opponent has to knock it out. If they gust around it and still take out a 2 prize Pokemon, and they've taken out the one that you've attached all this energy to, well, you can put this wherever you want, so you're going to spread it across your board, but still, if they're taking out something you're trying to set up for a following turn, it could hurt. But if you don't have a Sawda, maybe you have the Nest Ball, Switch Cart, you get into this, you're helping yourself establish a bench. I like the idea of it as a one-off card for Raging Bolt. Gravity Stone, this one you're probably scratching your head about. Spidops EX, I think, could see a comeback. I'll be honest. This makes it so that the Pokemon that this is attached to, when it's in the active, and your opponent's active Pokemon, their retreat cost is 1 more. Spidops' attack damage goes up by the amount of retreat cost your opponent has. So it's just kind of like your Spidops is scaling that up, this is scaling that up. It helps you get to higher breakpoint numbers. So I like that. I'm not saying it's going to be a top tier deck. It's also probably just around the B tier, but it is an upgrade for that deck nonetheless. The new A-Spec card Sparkling Crystal makes it so that if it's attached to a Terra Pokemon, it's going to reduce their attack cost by 1 energy of any type. Dragapult, we've talked about it a few times. This is just a great way to remove 1 of the energy required for it, and you can search this with Arven. So you can go Arven, get this, get an item card, right? Like grab yourself a rare candy to get the Dragapult online. As long as you attach for turn or the previous turn, you can start swinging, and then you can be charging up something else that turn instead. So yeah, I like this tool card. As an A-Spec slot though, it will be one of those things like, you'll have to test it out. Like, is it worth having this, or is Prime Catcher just better, or do you just want to run it with Neo Upper Energy? Because like you can go Neo Upper Energy, I'm ready. I just like the idea that this is searchable with Arven, whereas Neo Upper Energy, it's a little bit more situational. You can search that obviously with the new Colress card that came out in Shrouded Fables, but then if your opponent's running Kyurem, you're giving them access to go 110, 110, 110. So I'd just prefer not to include any card that says the word Colress in my decks, and I think this one has potential. I think I did kind of show you guys off the deck upgrades already. We accidentally clicked that one too early, but those are them. And I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Maybe there's some other cards in this set that upgrade decks, and I've just kind of overlooked them. Next, we're going to be talking about the cards that are worth having. Like if you pull this from a pack, if you're opening packs and pull these cards, I'd say keep them. First one I'm going to talk about is Dash Bunt EX. Its ability Full Meal Time makes it so 1 stringer turn, when you play this card from your hand to evolve, you can heal all damage from each of your evolution Pokemon. You have to discard all the energy when you do it though, but it's still a great way to just be like, well, if you have a deck that's able to recur energy out, like Gardevoir EX, for example, they can get energy back from the discard pile. If you've tanked to hit with something and it's nearly dead, it's like, well, I can heal all that off. I accelerate the energy back out. I'm going to take some damage when I do it, but I've avoided being an easy knockout on the following turn. Not saying that's the perfect deck to include this in, but just as an example, I feel like this is one of those cards where there is going to be very niche situations where it could come up. So if you pull it, it's worth having like 1 copy in your collection. Wouldn't necessarily say like run out of your way to buy it. If you see it for like $1 and you're just like, yep, having it as a tech could be good in the future, that's kind of the recommendation for it. Kling Clang, same thing. If you pull this from a pack, I'd hang on to it, or if you see it for like 10 cents, it's not a bad one to have, as its emergency spin ability makes it so that 1 stringer turn, if this Pokemon's in your hand and your opponent has a stage 2 Pokemon in play, you can put this onto your bench. It's a steel type Pokemon, so you'll be hitting weakness into some relevant-ish things, like Chin Pao always seems to make a comeback. Decks still like to run Frigibacks or Baxcalibur. You hit weakness into them, you're doing 130 damage, 2 colorless energy, so it's not that expensive to charge up. Like even with a DTE, well, double turbo energy, you do 110 into a Chin Pao, doubles to 220, you're still taking that knockout. They're gonna have Baxcalibur on their bench, and it's just like, yep, free, let's do this. So yeah, I'd say hang on to it. I'm not 100% sold on that it'll be justified in every deck, but the ability is pretty strong. Like even just being able to get a single prize attacking option for some decks, like stage 2 Pokemon, Charizard EX is an example as a stage 2 Pokemon. If you have a way to charge up the attack, you can do a bit of chip damage and force them to take a single prize. It's skewing the prize trade for your opponent in some situations. It could be good. Glass Trumpet, I feel like even if you're not playing Terrapagos, it's a card that if you pull it, hang on to this one. It can be going onto any colorless Pokemon as long as you have a Terra Pokemon in play. We're going to get more colorless Pokemon over the next, 2 years that this is in rotation. So 100% worth hanging on to. We know that there's Eevee is coming out. It's getting Sylveon EX, and it sounds like every evolution is going to get its own EX, same as how they did with Evolving Skies, giving them all Vs and VMAXs. So having this to be able to charge up your EVs and then evolve up into them, since there's an EV that can evolve up when it's in the active, even if it's just come into play. Yeah, Glass Trumpet is definitely a good card to hang on to because I feel like there's some crazy stuff around the corner. We've got 2 new tool cards. These could be good. So this one makes it so if you get hit by a psychic Pokemon, you take 60 less damage from the attacks. You have to discard it. So if you know you have a bad matchup into psychic decks and it's just like, oh, I need a breakpoint number, we're getting a way to do this, like remove that breakpoint number for your opponent. It's a tool, so they can remove it with Lost Vacuum. If you pull it, maybe hang on to it. And they did the same thing with fire types as well. And yeah, Gearheart, your thing's broken again. There was a couple cards on here where earlier I took a look through and it wasn't quite working. So we're going to show the full list, and there is a few more on here. So the Karascata is on here. It's got the ability Primal Knowledge. Your Pokemon are going to do 30 more damage into your opponent's active evolution Pokemon. If your decks run rare candies, I think this is a great, just kind of like 1/1 line you can slot into there if you need to get to breakpoint numbers. I'm not saying it's going to go into every deck that has rare candy. I'm just saying if you find yourself in situations where you're like, I'm just shy of taking knockouts, it's like, well, do you have space for a 1/1 Karascata line? Or is your deck already running Arita? Because Arita can grab you the fossil card for it, and it can grab the Karascata for it. Or it can grab you the rare candy Karascata, and then it's just kind of like, hey, this is kind of like a choice belt. It's boosting me up by 30 damage, except it's not a tool card, so I don't need to worry about it getting Lost Vacuumed away, and it's repeatable on every single one of my Pokemon, right? Like, the thing that has a tool attached to it, when it gets knocked out, the tool's gone. The thing that's getting boosted by Karascata, when it gets knocked out, well, the next thing's still going to get boosted by Karascata. Ledian line is coming out in this set. It allows you that when you evolve up into it, you can gust up one of your opponent's Pokemon from the bench that has 90 or less HP remaining. It's kind of niche. If you pull it, maybe hang on to it because going for those pre-evolutions could be good. But the fact that it's like you need to evolve up into it, it's going to be taking up 2 deck slots at least. I'm not 100% sold it'll see play in the meta, but it is one of those things that, like, for even just for having the threat of it could be good. Like even just benching a Ladybot to be like, oh yeah, I might gust something up. It might come up. There's also the supporter card Lacey. I believe we talked about this in the staples. I think it's a good one. If you pull it, just hang on to copies of it. And the A-Spec Great Tree. So you can just choose one of your basic Pokemon in play. It has to have been out for a turn though. You can't just immediately evolve it up, but you get to search your deck for a stage 1 that evolves from that. If you evolve it into a stage 1, you can then search your deck for a stage 2 that evolves from that. It's a little nutty, like to just be able to search out Pokemon, so you're not needing like Ultra Balls to find pieces. You don't need rare candy to go from a basic to a stage 2. It's just like, hey, as long as I didn't prize the stage 1, I can get through these pieces. Being on an A-Spec though, I don't know, I'm kind of mixed on that. Like I don't think that's strong enough to bump out something like a Prime Catcher or an Unfair Stamp. There may be niche situations where it comes up, so if you pull this from a pack, I'd say hang on to it, but I wouldn't say like run out the door and go buy this. The other cards I want to talk about are cards that'll likely see play in, or maybe not see play in the Gym Leader Challenge format, but have potential for the Gym Leader Challenge format. So we've got the Joltik, we've already talked about that, 1 colorless energy, search your deck for 2 grass, 2 lightning, being able to charge up some niche attackers, like I think Amazing Rare Raikou wants to use grass, lightning, steel. It sounds like there might be a ban on that card though, so yeah, maybe the Joltik's not justified anymore, but even just being able to pay for like colorless attack costs on your lightning Pokemon, like if they've got 3 colorless energy required to do an attack, and it's like, oh, it's a little hefty to pay for. Like, yeah, I've got Flaffy and Electrike, but if I don't get those set up and I'm in a bad way, and Joltik's just kind of like, I got you covered. I can just do this. We'll just spread the energy across the board and be in a good spot. So it's got potential. A new Minchow coming out that does 30 base damage, but if your opponent has 5 or fewer cards in their hand, it's going to do 60 more damage. So effectively 90 for 1 fighting energy. It's not too bad. You've got some ways to boost that up too, being like a fighting type. So could see play. I feel like if it was a basic, it would go a lot further. Being on a stage 1, it's worth experimenting with, but I'm not necessarily saying it's going to be in all fighting decks. The new Swalot and Gulpin. So the Gulpin, it's, I think, the only dark type Gulpin we have. I believe they've previously been either Psychic or Grass. I could be wrong. Let me know in the comments down below. But the Swalot has the attack Gulp down. It does 10 base damage, and if this Pokemon has more energy attached to it than your opponent's active Pokemon, 160 more damage. It's a much bigger number than the Minxiao is doing. It does mean you have to be hitting things that effectively have no energy, because you're going to have one dark energy on this. But if you can boss something up or like gust something up that doesn't have energy attached and swing for that kind of number into them for 1 energy, that's pretty good. I feel like that's definitely worth a slot in your deck. Plus you've got like Zoroark that can swap into things in dark decks. So like even just having this as a one-off copy, you don't even need the Gulpin necessarily. Just like put Swalot in the discard pile, use the Phantom Transformation Zoroark to switch into this when the situation arises. Yeah, I like the idea of that. The Duraludon and Archaludon we've talked about already. The Klinklang we've talked about. They're all steel types, and I could see being played in steel decks. Archaludon effectively making it so every single one of your steel Pokemon has a float stone attached to them when they have an energy on it. Yep, that's good. And Klinklang, if you're into decks that play stage 2s, you can just cheat this out. Yeah, I like that idea. A lot of GLC decks are going to have stage 2s on their bench, and it's just an easy attacker to throw down. Has pretty hefty HP and does a pretty good number. Raging Bolt, also a new dragon type Pokemon that can be slotted into your dragon decks. You've got like double dragon energy that can be paying for the attack cost on there, and then just charge it up in some other ways to get some sniping potential. Definitely seems like a card that could be worth including. And Fan Rotom just being great for colorless decks, as you can just go Nest Ball, get into this, and search your deck for 3 more colorless Pokemon to get onto your board. Well, 3 colorless Pokemon with 100 or less HP, but for your pre-evolutions, I think that's a great inclusion. Crispin we've covered before, but just some great energy acceleration for any deck, right? Like it's not linked to any specific type. There's some types that struggle with energy acceleration. So just being able to go, all right, just grab 2 energy. They do have to be 2 different types, as long as you include at least 1 extra type of energy to get the most value out of this to pay for a colorless attack cost. Yeah, I like the idea of it. And Lacey, also just another solid draw supporter. You are limited to 1 copy of a card with the same name, so draw support can get a little bit tricky. It's a single prize format. There's going to be half of the game where your opponent has 3 or 4 prizes remaining. You'll be able to shuffle and draw into 8. So very keen for the idea of that card. And since we talked about GLC, I don't know, if you guys have been around the channel for a while, you might be aware that I have my own format. We're doing the budget build battle format. It's in the standard format, so unlike GLC where you have access to every single card that's been printed since black and white, it's just the stuff that's in standard rotation, so with every set, makes quite a big impact onto it. You are limited to no rulebox cards, so no A-Specs, no Vs, no Radiants, no EXs, and a limitation of 2 copies of a card with the same name, unlike GLC where it's 1. There is an exception though, where you can have additional basics as long as they evolve, just to add consistency into deck. So if it evolves into a stage 1, you can have 1 extra copy of the basic. If it evolves into a stage 2 that's in your deck, you can have 2 extra copies. And there should be a little thing popping up on the screen now, taking you through a video for deck lists and an explanation of the format if you're keen. But for new cards in that format, kind of similar ones showing up. We've got Ladia and the Ledian line, gusting up things with 90 HP in a single prize format. There's a lot of things that have 90 or less HP that are going to be on people's benches. Joltik for energy acceleration, the Swalot, the Klinklang for the same reasons we've already talked about. But then the Marowak, we did mention it as kind of like a rogue deck for standard. I do think it has potential in the budget build battle format as well, just as a solid attacker to go into. Drifloon also, for standard, I don't think it's going to be even like an okay rogue deck, I'll be completely honest. It does a multiplier of 50 for every Drifloon or Drifloon in play, but you're only going to ever have 4, which means, well, you're capped at 200. In standard, that's not great. In the budget build format, though, you'd be capped at 3, but it gets you up to 150 damage for 1 psychic energy. That's a pretty solid number to be able to hit. There's also the Drifloon that does extra damage for every damage counter on it, so it's just like, well, you're hurting them. You can use them as a solid attacking option to go into, since Gardevoir EX isn't legal in that format. Getting damage counters on them to make them relevant attackers is a little tricky. Well, yeah, this is going to give them a way to do that, and it's a solid attacker in itself. Fan Rotom and the Bouffalant, same idea as why they'd be in Terrapagos. If you can get 2 Bouffalant on your bench, they will be making it so your basic colorless Pokemon are taking 60 less damage. I like the idea of that. Like, I feel like you can do some pretty crazy stuff with that, and Fan Rotom just adding a consistent way to search out pieces. Lacey and Crispin we've covered before, but will be great additions for the format as well. And now that we've gone over all those cards though, just to make it a little bit easier if you guys are wanting to see them all in one spot, here's the full list of kind of what I think might see play in the meta and could be worth picking up from the set. Obviously, you know your budget better than I do. I'm not saying you need to buy every single one of these cards. I'm saying if you're looking into buying cards, these are the ones to have on your radar. Pick the decks that you think you'll actually play. So like if you know you're gonna pair Terrapagos, pick up the Terrapagos pieces. You probably don't need Ledians then, or Hydrapples. And like for myself, that's kind of how I view it. Like I know I'm not going to be playing every single deck. And there's also a lot of these decks where it's like, you need to have pieces that have previously come out. Like the Hydrapple, you need Ogre Bonds, and they're going for like a decent price right now. I know in Australia, I think they're around 15 to 20 bucks a piece. So this is the list that I'm personally picking up, and I'd love to hear what lists you guys are considering getting. Terrapagos seems like a lot of fun, so I'll probably pick it up. It seems like it's got a potential spot in the top tiers of the meta. The Karascata, just as a 1/1 line, I think it's going to be like a 10-cent card, so I'm going to pick it up. The Joltik, I think it's going to have a lot of potential as more cards get revealed. I don't personally play Raging Bolt, but there'll be other decks you can slot it into. The Charjabug, I don't think I covered this one earlier. It was on one of the screens, but I think I kind of skimmed over it. But Charjabug, it's got the attack similar to like Mirage Step Curlia, where you can just search your deck for 3 of them and put them onto your bench. There is a Vikavolt currently in rotation that does extra damage for each Charjabug on your bench. So you use Charjabug, you get them onto your bench. You don't even need Grubbins to evolve them up, meaning you can have other Grubbins on your bench that can be rare candied into Vikavolt and keep those 3 Charjabugs in play and just constantly keep putting pressure into your opponent. So I really like that idea, and Archaludon EX I'm 100% sold on, so I want to get the pieces for that. But yeah, that's just my list. I'd love to hear what cards you guys are considering picking up, and yeah. I don't know where I'm going with this. Kind of lost my train of thought there. I'll be honest. Getting to the point where I'm trying to do these videos all in one take, so I hope I didn't ramble too much and that you enjoyed it. If you haven't already, make sure to boop that subscribe button so that you know as more videos are coming out, and here's some other stuff that YouTube thinks you'll like. Till next time though, stay golden, you Goombas.